Welcome to Layer the Alchemist, where we discuss all things heavy metal and hard rock. On today's episode, let's discuss Iron Maiden's A Matter of Life and Death. This is the 14th studio album from Iron Maiden, and it's the third album in the what I call Rob era of the band, the Return of Bruce era. Bruce left the band for 2 albums. He comes back, they release A Brave New World, Dance of Death, and then A Matter of Life and Death. This album came out in 2006. That long ago. It's hard to believe that it's been that long ago because, gosh, it seems like yesterday that I was buying this on the day that it came out. And this phase for Iron Maiden is kind of an interesting one and a tad bit polarizing from some people. You have one camp that really only likes the classic era stuff. Then there's people that like all eras of the band. And I'm guessing that there's people out there that maybe they discovered the band during this period because at this point, gosh, they're going on 20 plus years when Bruce came back to the band. That's longer than he was originally, his original first run in the band. So it's really incredible. And they've sort of evolved into, I'm not going to say a different band, but they have changed their sound and the band has evolved. And for this Return of Bruce era, this is probably one of my favorites. Actually, this one and the most recent one, Book of Souls. So Maiden, in my opinion, they started moving in more of a, we'll say progressive, but not really progressive in the sense of Emerson, Lake and Palmer style progressive with lots of keyboards and drum solos and stuff like that. More progressive in the arrangements of the songs, the sort of what they were going for with the music. You don't get much 3.5-minute songs from this era of the band. You get a lot of really longer songs with a lot of changes, a lot of different things going on, a lot of movements. Sometimes to a fault. I know one of the issues I have with this era of the band is that I really think they could stand to edit some of the stuff down. Like, for instance, this record is, I think, 71 minutes long. And although I really enjoy it, if it had been trimmed down to a more reasonable, let's say 50 minutes, I think it would have had a little bit more impact. This one, for me, it has a certain tone to it that's a little different than the other Return of Bruce albums. It's kind of dark. It's a real kind of dark album with a lot of like war and religion type themes. There's a lot of heavy riffing on it. There's a lot of sort of moody style riffing. The production on the album is good. I'm not going to say that it's great. Standing on its own, you've heard me complain about the loudness wars. I made a video on that. If you haven't seen it and don't know what the loudness wars are, check out that other video that I made. Iron Maiden takes a brave stand and really goes against the trend of making really loud, compressed albums at this point. Dance of Death suffered from that to a certain degree, and the band seemed to be aware of it. I heard Steve Harris saying that they weren't completely happy with the sonics of Dance of Death. So with this has a much more simpler sound to it. Maybe to a fault at times. It could have been just sort of produced and made a little bit more lush sounding or something. The frequency ranges are a little bit narrow. It feels a little bit flat at times. Like maybe the overall thing could have just had a nice, better EQ spectrum on it or something. But I applaud the band for not falling into this crushing dynamic range trap. Because this record, it doesn't suffer from that. It's got a lot of nice stereo space. There's a lot of nice, there's 3 guitars in the band at this point. Yannick, Dave, and Adrian. There's a lot of nice sort of layered guitar stuff. There's also a lot of really nice keyboard stuff in it. It's more textural, but it just helps lift up certain sections of songs. It helps add like atmosphere. There's acoustic guitar stuff, clean guitar stuff that just give the album it's a nice headphone mix. The bass is mixed nice on it. You can hear the bass really well without it being really overbearing. Bruce sounds great. I think the drums, especially on this one, do sound really great. And the other thing that I would praise this for is, and I was sort of thinking of this when, I don't know what struck me. Just the other day, I go for these walks sometimes that little over an hour, so I can usually get in at least one full album. And I just felt like listening to this particular record. And so I popped it on. It's just sort of an urge that came out of nowhere. I hadn't listened to it in a while, and listened to it from beginning to end. And I really enjoyed it. And one of the things that jumped out at me was that it really sounds like they recorded this like a live band. It doesn't, I mean, I'm sure it was recorded with a computer, but it sounds like they went in and that they played live. So there's times when things speed up. They tend to speed up more than slow down. In fact, I can't think of anywhere where it felt like things were slowing down. I think Nico, as much as I like Nico, he has a tendency where he does his fills. It sort of makes everything feel like it's getting faster and faster. But it works. It gives it a very live, organic feel. I made a video that I haven't put out yet. I'm not sure if I'm going to put it out. I might redo it, where I talk about why so many bands sound the same to me nowadays. And I think a big part of that is that everybody is recording on computers. They're what's called quantizing, which is where you take the notes and the rhythms and you tell the computer to put it all right on the beat. So it sounds, if they start at one tempo, it ends at exactly the same tempo. And it makes everything sort of sound robotic, and it takes the life out of it. Like I was listening to, after I listened to this, I listened to the latest Judas Priest album. And I think that album, you can sort of, it sounds like it was done on a computer. Everything was straightened out and quantized and everything. The drums sound like they were triggered. Whereas on here, you hear things speeding up and slowing down. It has a much more of an organic feel to it. And it makes it a lot more exciting when things... This is something that some people find fault with this era of the band. And I do understand that because, I as I mentioned earlier, I think what this era of the band suffers from is the inability of them to edit themselves. I know Kevin Shirley produces this era of the band, but I'm not really sure if he has the same influence of someone like a Martin Birch, who is probably saying, look, you need to cut that out. You need to repeat this, cut that out. I don't know if Kevin Shirley has that influence. I get the impression the band comes in and they're doing what they want to do. And because of that, some of these songs they drag on too long. Way too many songs start off slow and quiet with like a plucked guitar thing, and then it just builds up. They could use some editing, but through all that, these songs have a nice sort of flow to them. They build, they start off slow, they get a little bit faster, then it drops back down again. And they could have done that with a computer straightening everything out, but it would have sucked the life out of everything. So I really applaud Maiden for coming out and doing an album that feels more organic, more natural, like a old school album like they would have made in the 80s. So the album starts with Different World. I mentioned before there aren't many short songs on here. This is the token short song. It seems like during this era, there's always one song early in the record that's the sort of quicker number. And then pretty much from here on out, every song is long. I didn't look at the times of them, but everything's got to be in the 5 to 7 to 10 minute range from this point out. There's a lot of great riffing. Like I mentioned, there's a lot of kind of darker feeling things like Brighter Than 1,000 Suns. That's probably my favorite song on this album. It's got this odd meter riff to it. It's really kind of this emotional thing that just builds up, and Bruce sounds kind of ominous a little bit. The way he sings in the verse, starting off in the lower part of his range. The Longest Day is another one that has that vibe to it, a song about war, and it's got a real moody, sort of atmospheric feel to it. Again, a lot on this record. You hear keyboards that come in and out that you almost don't notice them. When you're listening with headphones, you hear them. They're so subtle, but they really help just sort of elevate the mood, set the tone in a lot of these songs. Another one that I really like, and that was the sort of single, if you will, off this record. I remember actually hearing this on the radio, believe it or not. The Reincarnation of Benjamin Brigg, really great, catchy. Maybe this is an example of a song that it seems like they may have made a conscious effort to focus that song a little bit more, and I wish they could have done that maybe with some of the other ones, because I think this works in that song really well. It moves through that song a little bit better. The song moves really well. For the Greater Good of God is a great one with a big chorus. A lot of these have the thing. It starts off quiet. Bruce is singing kind of his lower register, and then these big, these colors don't run, this big chorus. For the Greater Good of God, Bruce is just wailing up high. And then it ends on a real kind of somber note, the legacy, with like these acoustic guitar, this pattern at the beginning that this whole song ends with just these like kind of ringing chords. So the album has a real sort of flow and journey to it, and even though it's kind of long, and there were times where it did feel like I would lose my attention a little bit when I was listening to it from beginning to end. It's still a great album. It's got a lot of great riffing in it. The band has taken this thing now where a direction where, like in the guitars, all the solos are very melodic. They all sort of fit the song. It doesn't sound like anybody's trying to show off anymore. Everything is kind of for the sake of the song in the solos. And even in Steve Harris's bass playing, I'm a bass player. As much as I would love to hear Steve play more, he seems to pick his spots a lot better on this album. He has little spots where he breaks out and the bass, changes the lick up, or he's playing like a unique sort of lick. But a lot of times he's just kind of staying in the pocket, supporting the song. Musically, really the hero on this record for me is Nico. His drums sound great on this. He really drives all the songs. His drums are really up front. There's a lot of fills, and his hi-hat, the snare sounds great on this record. Of course, Bruce sounds great. Bruce hasn't lost a step. If anything, somehow he sounds maybe better than he did back in the 80s, which is absolutely amazing. So a cool record from a new phase for the band. So I'm going to be talking, of course, I will cover other albums from this era, but for some reason I was inspired to listen to this. I was digging it, and I wanted to talk about it, discuss it. So, all right, there you go. Let me know what you think of this album. Let me know what you think of this era of Iron Maiden in general. Let me know down in the comments. Make sure you hit like and subscribe. And until we see you again, make sure you stay heavy, stay metal.